7:01.
Okay, we are recording. Welcome everybody. Today is October 23rd, 2019. This is the SIG API Machinery bi-weekly meeting. We have a couple of interesting items in the agenda, and David claimed he was going to go first, so I will pass it out to David.
Sure. So I was on SIG Off last week, and they were talking about ideas for how they wanted to change the way you express what gets logged for the audit log or not. And one of the things that happened to come up was the fact that some resources can be considered sensitive. We have an example in Cube of secrets. We have an example in OpenShift of access tokens. And these sensitive resources should be logged differently or treated differently by the audit trail, and they were trying to figure out how they could identify them. And this happened to trigger in my head the thought that I'd had with Stefan maybe a couple months prior, talking about encryption at rest, which we support for etcd, and how we list it today based on a set of resources. But there's no way for a CRD author to express, hey, I'm sensitive too, and I want to be encrypted at rest. And it occurred to me that if we could come up with a way we were happy with expressing that a resource is sensitive, we would be able to direct people from SIG Auth towards a solution we liked, and they may have more capacity to work on.
So you're thinking like a type annotation or something for the entire resource or the entire object?
Yeah, so one way would be to expose something via discovery. Just like first thought that pops into my head. You could expose something via discovery that says, I'm a sensitive resource. And that could be used to inform an audit trail. And my phone is ringing, how embarrassing. And so you would have the external notion in a generic way. An aggregated API server could say, I am sensitive, and then the aggregator would not perhaps log the request, for instance.
So I've got two mental models for how you could go about doing this. One is you just marking particular fields as sensitive, and if any field is marked as sensitive, then you want to encrypt the whole object at rest. But that informs like logging, you just exclude the sensitive fields. The other is like you don't do all that work and you just mark the resource as sensitive or not.
So I guess my goal for this conversation was, do we think that such a thing would be useful? I think that it is. I wanted to make sure that most people agree that it's useful. And then if we agree that it's useful, we can separately talk on Slack about how we could model it, and then get back to the SIG Auth folks about, hey, we'd be interested in a KEP that did something like this if you were inclined. Yeah,
if they're going to do the work, then yeah, useful is always a question of like, is it more useful than like the other things that we would be doing?
Yeah. So in this case, we can see multiple potential purposes. If this did exist, would we use it to, on say CRDs, to inform our storage, our etcd storage, that it should encrypt the values?
It's a little tricky to like turn this on and off. Do we handle that correctly with secrets right now?
Turning encryption at rest on and off?
Yeah.
There is a mechanism to do it, yes. You have to be careful about how you describe your file, but it can't be done.
As long as we think we can implement it in a way that doesn't mean if you go into your CRD definition and flip the flag on or off, that we don't like drop the keys and thus make everything inaccessible or something like that.
Okay.
And also David, encryption is a multi-step process which is done by our operator or by the migration tool we have. How do you want to do that automatically?
So I see separate categories for instance, I create my CRD and it indicates that it should be encrypted at rest. Well, they're all encrypted from the beginning if I do that. If I turn it on partway through, everything new gets encrypted, and we have the storage migrator tool
Yeah, you have to use the stored migrator.
Data,
Okay.
go ahead and move it. The primitives exist. I don't think that a lack of having a fully automatic flow in Cube should prevent us from taking the first step of making something possible. So.
Yeah, I think it's probably good. Okay, so there's one failure mode that hasn't been mentioned here, which is what we used to do at some point for secrets with apply, which is copy the sensitive data into an annotation, which is visible to everybody. Do you think this interacts with that at all?
I don't think so, because I was thinking about trying to manage this on a resource level, not on a per field level.
Yeah, if we're just, that actually makes it quite a bit simpler. If it's just a property of the, it's basically a property of the storage version. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a property of the type. We could present it as a type property in the Open API spec, but we could also present it as a field in our discovery, in our homegrown discovery document. That might be easier. I don't know.
Yeah, that's along the lines of what I'm thinking. I will sketch up at least an email, and I will send it off to SIG Auth and SIG API Machinery as a direction they can pursue.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that. Any objections in this room or further discussion?
My only observation would be that for logging, I mean, if we wanted to be sensitive with logging, doing it at a resource level basic is going to mean that you can, if you want to be secure, all you can do is log the path to the resource, but you shouldn't be logging anything, even the name, right?
I guess I would have, yeah, we should work that out in the discussion. I guess I would expect the implication for logging to be that you can only log the metadata. So you still have to record that somebody messed with something.
So we can talk on the thread. There are wrinkles. We can decide whether we're going to go after those wrinkles or not.
Yeah.
Jordan made the wrinkles. I blame him. I was only the guy that reviewed and approved.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Jordan causes the wrinkles to exist.
All right. So thanks for letting me go first, Stefan.
Okay.
Jordan is not on the
Yeah, Jordan's not on the call, so it would have been funnier if you were. Okay.
right here. What are you talking about?
Oh.
Right here.
You're right, it was funny.
Okay, should we go on to Stefan's?
Yes.
This was triggered by my too late comments on the immutability cap, and I think it drew out the one thing that I really was like, oh, I don't know, that seems really annoying for users, is making them specify the normalization system. So yeah, you want to say it in your words?
Actually, this topic was our main discussion long before you reviewed that. So Antoine and myself and Jordan, we discussed exactly the same thing. So it looks like that's a crucial point. Immutability, I think, is just one topic where this is important, but we notice there are more older topics like validation and defaulting as well. And we never really answered the question I put there in the beginning: when are CRs, custom resources, equal? I'm not sure about the history for native resources, whether this came up with protobuf encoding or even before, but we usually use semantic equality there.
I had one asterisk there with the protobuf encoding. It's because we generate wrappers around our lists, it's not what you would expect from regular proto encoding. We still tell the difference between an unset list and an empty list, which you actually can't do in regular proto if you don't have wrappers. So asterisk. Please continue.
Yeah. So what I find natural is, okay, I cannot mark it here. Maybe I can do it here. You can see it. Yeah, you can. So this is what I find natural or consistent for whatever we do. When we talk about equal objects, I expect if they are equal before the request, so on the client side, following some equality definition, I expect that the request does the same thing. If this is not the case, we should have good reasons that we violate this condition.
Can you unpack the math there and say in English or something other than symbols?
Okay, it means when I have objects like JSON blobs on the client side, and they are equal semantically. Like they have different undefined and null and empty. So some values differ if you really look strictly in the object. But according to this weak equality, they are the same. So when you start with that, so that's what I call A equal B, this EQ. I expect that when I send those two objects to the server with the same request, the same thing happens. The response is the same, again, according to the equality we define, but also the same thing is persisted. Otherwise, it's strange that the equality holds on the client side, but the server does different things.
Yeah. So in my words, like if two objects are equal by whatever definition of equal we choose, then they ought to have the same effect on the system.
Yeah.
The requests succeed are the same, and the stored object, like the returned object, is the same.
It seems to say that the equal on the client side is the same as the equal on the server side.
Yeah, but equal and well, actually, equal
Equal is unclear there. Does that mean that they would actually be coerced to be identical? And what is returned would be identical?
That's a good question, what it really means. This is, of course, more than just the response. It's hand-wavy, for sure.
Yeah.
We can discuss that later on.
The first equal, like A equal B, like that's either strict or semantic or some other version. The second one actually means like has the same effect or something like that.
Yes.
Like a request can't be equal to another request.
So when we say,
I mean, behavior, everything around this request, whatever this is, I'm hand waving for sure.
Sure, but when we say the behavior, we're looking at things like applying defaults and that kind of thing.
That's the point. Yes.
Defaulting, validation,
Success.
And what is returned, maybe.
What is returned? No, I think it should include what is returned.
The effect on the system is the same.
Yeah, the like effect on the system is the same, and the return of the request should also pass the equality by whatever. Well, no. Do we expect our requests to normalize it? Like, suppose
that's the question. That's one of the questions.
That's one mechanism which could enforce that.
That undefined and null are the same, then and empty means something different. Then you might have two things that pass the equality, and I would expect the server to normalize it so that like you get if you had nulls in your input, you got undefined in your output.
I would expect that as well. It's basically what we have with native resources to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Just by deserializing. The problem that we can just not switch to semantic equality is the next point, that starting with TPRs and CIDs, of course, we never really defined that to the user, I think. Mm-hmm. And we were always strict, like we stored everything as sent by the user and returned it as stored in etcd without any of those normalizations. And I bet that many third-party controllers expect this behavior. And I know a couple in OpenShift which use CIDs. They will just fail if we change that. So they do just normal reflect deep equal on many things. So
you can reflect that deep equal, like controllers are doing that.
Controllers do that, yeah.
There's a variety of client behaviors. So some clients that, Go treats missing items in a key value map very gracefully, but some languages will panic if you look for a key that isn't there. And so if you submit an object to the server and that has like a key : null, and the server preserves that and returns it to you, your client is happy. And if it normalized that away so the key was absent, that client would panic. So Java and Python have some like map panic behaviors that I've seen reports of in generated clients.
So we probably have to help these clients, but can we all agree that that is bugs on the client side?
That's a good question.
They expected the data they submitted to be preserved? That doesn't seem like a bug.
No, it's a bug to expect more than JSON guarantees.
JSON guarantees that. JSON round trips and defines presence and absence and null and empty string distinctly. That's not, there's nothing untoward about expecting that to be preserved.
Yeah. Like if I had to deal with this in Java, I would definitely expect that to happen, and I'd be kind of angry if it suddenly changed on me. Now, maybe I could get used to a different behavior, but I'd be very angry if it suddenly changed.
Yeah. So what I get from that, we defined pretty bad semantics for our API, which bites us now. And the question is, what is the way out? So we can ask that later on. Validation and defaulting are both they're defined in ways which need strict equality. Validation can distinguish between null, undefined, and empty. So you can have objects which are equal, semantically equal, but one is valid, the other one is not. And similar things with defaulting, you can, if you lose a null or an empty and it becomes undefined for some reason because you use something like server-side apply or some patch mechanism, suddenly the object has an undefined field which is defaulted. And if you send that to the server, maybe it's not, it should be a no-op, but it's not anymore because of the defaulting, or it's not validating anymore. So the request for A and B is different just by defaulting, whether it applies or not. And yeah, this comes us or gets us back to the immutability question we had in this cap. Immutability, of course, is influenced by defaulting. If you default something, it changes the object, and it might render a no-op request suddenly mutable, although it should be immutable. So we have a hard time just because we have this validation and defaulting behavior to switch directly to semantic equality for mutability.
Okay.
Of course.
I understand you better now. I didn't realize that TPRs and CRs were like that.
I
fear we never really defined that and documented that. I'm not sure. Jordan, do you know, or David?
Sure.
No, we did not document it. It was an artifact of the way they were received and deserialized on the wire into JSON from JSON, and then stored back that way. Now, I do think we get an opportunity when we introduce the whatever binary encoding we have. We get an opportunity to say, if you want to use binary encoding, it will change what these things mean.
Yeah, so we could have something
that follows the same path that we hit with Proto. Originally, we persisted everything in JSON and distinguished between null and empty string and everything. And when we started persisting in binary, that's when things started getting coerced.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. There's two kind of separate questions. One is, how do we want it to eventually work? Like, what is the proper way to work? And the like, after we know where we're trying to go, then we can talk about how do we want to get there. Like, what's the path to change? Because it seems like something has to change, because if we preserve the, like, literally anything you can say in JSON we don't change and just return to you directly, that it's unclear how that can work with apply. Like, you wouldn't be able to desire all possible JSON states with apply.
Yeah, if you go down a bit.
I mean, it's still subject to the schema, so it's.
But there's a lot of you're saying we can make people in the schema say, like, undefined is okay, but a null is not.
I mean, we already say things like that. Like, you can mark a field as required or not. You can mark a field as nullable or not.
Does that help people if they specify something in a map and make it null?
So null is a special case anyway. You have to opt in, and not many people do that anyway. Yeah. We just need that for raw extension and for custom marshallers today. Otherwise, it's probably just not used, or not much. Now we put some questions at the bottom there. Do we faithfully handle all those three values today? I heard from your comments, Daniel, servers that apply is probably not among them, which handles it faithfully today.
I think the type that we currently use to store an object probably faithfully passes it through.
Okay.
It's just that not everything corresponds to like a sensible instruction, right? Like, so apply uses presence or absence to determine whether or not you have an opinion about the field, which means that it's very problematic to use presence or absence to drive some semantic behavior about the object, right?
But if I put a null, it's an opinion.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
We treat that as an opinion, yes.
do we treat it as do we store that in an owner?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
So the presence of a field with a null is an opinion that I want this thing to be absent.
That you want it to be null, yeah.
Yeah, we talked
I mean,
about
especially for CRDs, right?
we talked about doing maintaining field removals via apply that way. Does it work already today?
No, but if you set a value to null, it's because you want the value to be null.
Yeah, that would be the same as removing it. No.
No.
It depends on what you're decoding into.
Yeah,
If the type you're decoding into,
that's what
can't-
you can't specify a list because you have to specify the list item in order to identify the thing that you want to not exist. Yeah.
I missed a part of this sentence, but
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thought maybe about this normalization idea. So we came up with that to answer the question or give us a way forward. Normalization, so you don't want that every user has to define it in a complicated way for every field or something.
Yeah,
But
I think we should decide how the system works, and like that's what you get, and maybe.
Yeah. My thought is here. I mean, you can build something like normalization, and we can even do it very easily. That there's the old way of normalization and the new way. So really just a Boolean thing or something like that.
Yeah, we may have something like that.
My thought is we have to make this explicit for CRD developers. They must be a conscious choice that they want the new behavior. And then they know, of course, that their API changes. Maybe they can do it in a new version, a new API version, to avoid breaking changes for their customers or for their consumers. But it must be conscious. We have done similar things with structural schema before. So if you want defaulting and publishing, you have to opt into this new, more sensible, more sane schema. And the same thing we could do here if we want to have semantical equality by default. So,
yeah, I think that's what we'd have to, like, when we figure out what we want to do, that seems like the reasonable way to get there, is to make them opt in, yeah, I think that's the way to get there.
opt in the current version, and in a glorious future version, default to normalize.
CRD can be the first thing ever to go to a V2.
yeah, if you want to use Proto at some point, we can enforce it.
Yeah.
That's true. We can gate use of new features on it.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see why you picked the reflect.deep equal as your definition in the existing KEP. Yeah. I wonder if we should discuss this topic more. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the meeting with everybody, but we have like the apply sync on Tuesday, which I think I no longer have a calendar conflict with, that maybe this would be. I think my overarching, the thing that this brings to mind to me is like we need a plan to make sure the stuff that we're doing with CRDs and the stuff that we're doing with apply and built-in resources arrives at the same, at like the same set of semantics for users.
Yeah.
It's super not good if some of our APIs work differently than other APIs. Yeah. So Do we don't have a meeting or a sync up for the CRD, for our ongoing CRD work, do we?
No.
I wonder if we should expand the apply working group to consider schemas in general. Does that make sense to you, Stefan? Do you have another idea of how we can?
I'm fine with that if it's a European friendly time to a certain degree.
It's 9:30.
It's 9:30 in the morning, so it's more friendly than this meeting.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's the action item, is just to take this up in the working group apply and make sure that we have a convergence path.
Yeah. Maybe one last thing. So we envision to have this as alpha for 117, not beta. I will change the cap, but because we have to round trip on downgrade, we have to do alpha anyway.
Yeah.
We should have a good idea about this normalization topic before doing or going to beta with that.
Yeah, I agree.
So this is my rule of thumb.
I also wanted to mention, like, considering clients written in other languages is good to do in general, but especially for CRDs, because like we see more clients written in a variety of languages against extension APIs. Other clients in other languages don't have the semantic equality Go implementation readily available to them, and it's non-trivial to get right. And so like the most natural way a client has to compare if two API things are equal is just like serialize to JSON and see if the strings are equal. And so if we're depending on clients, even today, like we have the Go deep semantic equality helper, and even today our controllers sometimes get it wrong and we have to go fix bugs. Like if we need to make sure that whatever we ask clients of custom resources to do is not unreasonable in random languages.
Yeah, along those lines, like if we're using deep equal right now, I'd like some sort of assurance that that is actually the same operation as serializing both in JSON and comparing the strings. Otherwise, we might be having semantics that are difficult for people in other languages to replicate.
If the two things were consistently decoded, like with the same JSON decoder, then it is today. But we've also run into problems where some things would decode integers into untyped or unsized ints, and some would use int64 and some would use float64, and we would see.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also like if you like perform a manipulation on the object and like webhook does one
code. Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's from a webhook, then you're still going through a decoding pass. So we're using the same decoder stack, reading from etcd and reading from a webhook and reading from the request. So that's good. It's the in-process things that we're like setting a field to an unsized int, which would round trip to a sized int. That's where we got into trouble.
Yeah, I'm still pretty nervous about relying on the decoding.
We trust it a lot.
It just feels it feels brittle. Like that could change. Like maybe it comes out with a different map order or something.
Deep equal is fine on map order. It doesn't compare. But yeah, it seems like the least bad option. But
they're okay. So if we're depending on that, you could still have like two different JSON strings that happen to decode into the same structure and reflect deep equal thinks they're equal when actually the strings were different. Right. So maybe it doesn't have false negatives, but it could have false positives.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree of normalization on encoding. Like, we do it on the in-memory structure, which is fine. If a client was going to do that, it would have to like encode them with the same encoding settings and stuff. But most languages have a concept of, are these two objects equal, and can do like traversal or memory checks, or like worst case, you could encode them both to JSON and compare the strings, assuming you have a deterministic serializer.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the set of things that client can determine are equal, and the set of things that API server thinks are equal might still end up being different.
Yeah. In any case, all of those are easier to do than replicating our Go semantic equality implementation.
Yeah, I'm just to be clear, I'm not arguing that we use our existing semantic equality, because I think it's kind of ad hoc and doesn't.
Yeah.
Like I know I started it, but it grew into something that I'm not completely on board with.
Yeah, but also that if we replace it with another Go-based implementation that is, even if it's well tested and detailed and principled and everything, like expecting that to be ported into every language that everyone's going to write a client in, like it would be, and I think that's where we get into, should this normalization, should this affect what comes back from the server? Like, should the server be responsible for any coercing or normalization so that a naive client can like get an object, do some stuff, submit it to the server, get it again, and like be able to very simply compare and not worry about like all the normalization stuff the server did. Like, can it compare two objects that the server gave it, and in a simple way?
To that, I'd like to add some color to that, which is a lot of our API. In fact, I'd argue most or all of our API is about enabling multiple controllers or agents to act on the same resources in parallel. And not have to necessarily completely understand what each other is doing. And from that standpoint, like clients really need to tolerate a controller or something else coming in and taking over part of their resource in some way.
Yeah, I'm not talking about doing it in strict ways. More like if I get a thing and then I go do some stuff and come back, like did I do stuff that I need to submit to the server? Like one way that controllers do that is looking at a diff between the two. So.
Yeah, there's usually better ways of doing that, but
yeah, I mean, our controllers hit this bug probably, I can think of like 5 or 10 examples. Yeah, so I agree there are, but I also think that people will do this, and if we can avoid them getting bitten when they don't have to, that'd be great.
A lot of controllers that I've seen that
endpoints controller with empty slices and
controllers.
Yeah. You're far away from the mic, so I don't think people can hear you.
Sorry, there's a lot of custom controllers that I've seen that are like use the pattern of like read, do some work, do a deep equal or a semantic.deep equal, depending on whether or not they know the semantic.deep equal exists, and then use that to decide like if they want to submit to the server. That's a fairly common pattern with custom controllers.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, but we also see as controllers get more or as they need to be made more performant, like all that changes, and people eventually end up constructing a patch that the controller applies, right? And like to construct a patch,
I'm gonna differ on that, right? Like we'd like them to construct patches, but look at our controllers.
Well, but not all of our controllers are need to be performant. The ones that need to be performant have been changed to be patches, like the garbage collector or whatever. But like if you look at, I don't know, the scheduled job controller, like that thing is not performant at all. It like polls the world like every 10 seconds or something.
Right. It should be simple to be correct.
Yeah.
And correctness should not require you to do patches.
Yeah. I can buy that. Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think we have made good progress on this, and we will follow up on email in that cap and at the Apply Working Group meeting.
There's a comment in the chat. Cron job controller is bad example of everything. It's meant to be rewritten.
You need to reframe it, Mache. You need to say it's a great before in a before and after example.
Okay, it can be perfectly stated as it was a perfect example how we used to write controllers. How about that?
Yeah.
And it's definitely not a good example nor performant example of a properly written controller in the current days.
Yeah, it makes it very clear what the controller is doing, but it's not performant. Yeah, and it doesn't scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement. Okay. Any further thoughts on this? All right. I'm inclined to give everybody the remaining 24 minutes back.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, so I'm not going to take long. I did want to call out the KEP that I just opened about running conformance tests without beta APIs enabled. This is mostly on SIG Arch and the conformance workgroup front, but it touches the API server or the API machinery in a couple places, like with making it easy to turn off all beta APIs and turn off all beta features. So I tagged this as participating. I'll throw a link in, I guess, Slack. But it's, yeah, it's not a big deal for API machinery, but it did touch a couple flags we have.
Yeah, I left some comments on a conformant or on a request for a new test, I think yesterday, basically saying that like if you're going to test every generic API feature on every resource, there's a combinatorial explosion of tests. So
yeah, this is not that. This is like today, if you turn off beta APIs and beta features, the API server won't start because like we have internal things that are GA features that use loopback beta API requests and crazy things like that. And so
legit.
like that's bad, and we should have something that would catch accidents like that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to make a entry in the thing. Maybe you can post a link there.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll upload the recording later and see you hopefully in 2 weeks. Have a good your day and your week.
See you.
One minute.